Well, we did it. We made it through the offseason. Seahawks Training Camp is finally here. They open on Wednesday, just 48 hours away as I record this today. Today on the show, Brandan Schulze, formerly of the Field Gulls podcast, now host of Seahawkers Pod, and Dayna O'Gorman, my former co-host. You see her and hear her on Our Turf and Real Hawk Talk. We're going to break down everything as we head into training camp, who they're most excited to see, what area of the roster concerns them the most, who the team could ill afford to lose the most due to injury. And then, of course, we'll get their reaction to the throwback uniforms and which jersey are they going to buy first. That's coming up next. But first, hit like, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Best way to support the channel. Closing in on 2,000 subs. Let's get there by the time the season starts. And if you listen to the audio version, just subscribe on any platform that you prefer to listen to audio podcasts on. Then you won't miss any new episodes. Let's get into it. This is Seahawks Forever.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
So excited to have these two back in the fold again. My old Field Gulls cohorts, Brandan Schulze and Dayna O'Gorman. Guys, let's cut right to it. How you been? How are you? And how excited are you both for the training camp start on Wednesday?
I can't believe it's Wednesday.
Right.
It's so we were just talking about that. It seems to go so fast. You know, you have that long, drawn out month of June and the beginning of July. And honestly, there was not a lot of drama this year. And so it was pretty boring. But yeah, training camp. I mean, it's time. It's definitely time.
Brandan, isn't that a good thing though? Like that we have, knock on wood. Okay, we got 48 hours to get there, but we have made it through an entire offseason with no off the field trouble, no players in trouble, no weirdness, right? That used to kind of be a little bit of an annual thing.
Like it to be boring a little bit in terms of,
can't believe you said that out loud.
Hey, I'm about to say something else out loud in a little bit too. But
yeah, don't jinx it. Don't jinx it.
For the reverse jinx. See, if you say it, you're getting out in front of it.
Yeah, because this is, and really even for the next couple weeks of training camp, it's kind of the any news is usually bad news type period. Yeah. You don't get any other than the good news of, hey, everybody showed up and is not hurt at training camp. Like right. That's what you hope for. And anything apart from that is usually bad.
And there really aren't any contract issues. You know, we're all kind of wondering if anything will happen maybe with Nwosu, although I tend to think they're going to slow play that now. And still Zach Charbonnet and Devin Witherspoon haven't signed their contracts, but none of us expect that not to happen. So right. Yeah, a boring offseason.
And those rookies are starting to fall. CJ Stroud and Richardson both signed theirs today. So I think those first round picks are going to start to fall here pretty quick.
Yeah, and if you look, I took a peek at the salary cap stuff yesterday, and the Seahawks have, you know, depending on where you look, about 7.1, 7.2, and if you look at the contracts signed around them, that almost precisely equals what the first year cap hits are likely to be for those two guys. So we should see that probably by Wednesday. Well, let's start. Listen, since you brought it up, I was going to talk about this later. Let's get this thing out of the way because you already mentioned the word jinx. But you sort of, Brandan, you kind of teased it. There has been some news in the NFL this morning. Fortunately for the Detroit Lions, it looks like it's not as bad as it was when it first was reported that Chauncey Gardner-Johnson went down with a non-contact injury in practice, was carried off the field. Doesn't sound like there's any structural damage, so it sounds like that's not all that serious. But then Nyheim Hines, Buffalo Bills, out for the year with a knee injury that was suffered off the field in a non-football situation. Thankfully, it wasn't worse than it was when you hear the details of it. But let me start that because this is one of the questions that we had pondered. If there was one player on this roster, and Dayna, I'll start with you, that you're the most nervous about, or that you'd like to see them be careful with in the preseason because they can least afford to lose him, who would you say it is?
Every single running back.
But
because of the history of this,
backs are meaningless, right? They have no value.
Oh, don't even. I fight that battle on a daily basis in another podcast. I don't want to do it here. But let me tell you. But yeah, the running backs, wrap them in bubble wrap. And then I think all of us with Jamal Adams, we want to see him get out there. We want to see him, start, which we haven't heard one way or the other because I don't know that they know what they're going to get out of Jamal Adams. We probably won't see him I'm hoping by like week 2 or 3, but we don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
But for what we know right now in front of us, Seattle has such a history with these running backs of them getting hurt that I just want them to be really careful. Especially with Kenneth Walker, and that's, nothing against the rookie. It's just, that is always such a hindrance for this team and their game plan. So besides Geno, which of course, none of us can afford to lose. We all know that. But I just think that probably those running backs are the ones where I have a tendency to cringe a little during preseason games.
I should have qualified that. Any non-quarterback, because it goes
obviously.
without saying. Brandon, how about you?
Yeah, Kenneth Walker is a big one. So Dayna took that one from me.
Sorry.
On the defensive side, though, I got to go with Bobby Wagner, because when you think about I'm usually thinking toward veterans as players that you would protect anyway, because young guys, you kind of you assume that they're going to stay healthy. But with Bobby being up there in terms of his career and just in terms of what he could mean for the defense this year, I'm so nervous about. You talk about the offensive side of the ball in the running game. I'm nervous about the defensive side of the ball in the running game. And if Bobby is hurt, the amount of depth that the Seahawks have is almost non-existent. And we need Bobby Wagner to have a healthy full season.
I was going to go with Bobby if one of you had taken my guy. And I think the Seahawks might be right there with you, because they just worked out a couple of young linebackers again yesterday, and there's a spot open on the 90-man. Maybe they're looking to add one more body to that group. I'm going to go with Draymond Jones. The big free agent signing in the offseason, biggest free agent signing of John Schneider and Pete Carroll's tenure here. And I just think, there's so much uncertainty along that defensive front. A lot of young guys that they're counting on, and then a journeyman like Mario Edwards, and a guy like Jaron Reed, who's coming off a year where he looked on tape, looked really bad. A lot's being expected of him coming off a bad year. I think if Draymond Jones, they have so much invested in him, that's one that I think we can least afford to lose. Let's get to.
I want to see him though. Don't do this to me, Dan. I want to see him out there.
I think so too. I think too, if something were to happen to Jones, the backlash would be so big on Pete and John, because that's another big signing that can't stay on the field. I think that would just look so bad for their trades and their free agent signings. And it would be somewhat devastating to this team. But I just think also it's like, God, it would just feed that section of Seahawks fans that are just so adamantly anti John and Pete that it would just, it'd be exhausting.
I think they're going to take it easy with him anyway, if not just to sort of keep things under wraps, how they're going to use him, how that new whatever, I'm not going to use the word new scheme, but just whatever we're going to see this year and how they're going to work that. But I think they're going to try and get as many snaps for those young guys as possible anyway, to get them ready for the season. I think we'll see very little of Jones, and maybe Jaron Reed as well. I don't think we'll see a whole lot of him.
That makes sense.
Let's move on from that. I'm glad we got that one out of the way right off the bat. Let's talk about something more fun. People are still buzzing about the throwback uniforms, and had a great time talking with your co-host Clinton Bonner, Brandon, the other day, and loved his answer to how does a guy from New York become a Seahawk fan was tied directly to those uniforms. And that was cool to hear. We'll start with you, Brandon. Your thoughts on them, first of all, and first one you're going to get, or first one you would get if you're going to get one.
Right. Yeah. They're so good. Of all the things that I think I would want the most, like if I were going to invest money in something, I think I'd want a helmet just to have kind of on the shelf, just because I like that. But we could have gotten those before anyway. It's just that, gosh, those helmets look so good. But in terms of jerseys, Tyler Lockett is just my favorite player. And so even though he's the one that I already have a jersey of, I think I would get one in the blue just to get another one. And it's, gosh, can we wear them more though? Just the one game against the Browns?
Wants us to, right? He's already campaigning to have him wear them week 1, right? Some teams like Tennessee Titans just came out.
Don't get me started.
They're Houston Oiler throwbacks. They're going to wear them twice. But again, the choice to not, it would be, you'd maybe set aside an action green game for one of those. But There's only one on the schedule this year, but already the reaction is, I think you're going to see so much of that stuff in the stadium. They're going to sell so many of those jerseys that I would be shocked if in 24 we don't see them use them twice. Dayna, who do you like?
So the day they came out, I'm going to be honest about this. I spent $400. Like, I went to town, right? Because I've been waiting for years for this to come out. Like, we knew it was coming, and they kept coming up with excuse after excuse and the extra helmet and blah, blah, blah. And so it was of two thoughts here. One, it's like, how fun would it to be have a throwback jersey with a brand new baby player on it, right? Like, you get a Woolen, you get Witherspoon, one of those. That juxtaposition would be very cool. But at the same time, I'm not a jersey buyer. I own one jersey. It's a Richard Sherman jersey. I've had it since the Super Bowl year. It's just not something that I usually buy. But I said, if they ever do the throwbacks, I'm going to buy a Marshawn Lynch jersey. And then they didn't have them. Lynch was nowhere to be found, and you couldn't customize one. I was so pissed. So the other person who I thought really deserved a jersey in my closet, which sounds kind of crazy, but I'm very picky, is Bobby Wagner. And I decided that if he were to come back, I would probably get a Bobby Wagner jersey. So that's what I did. I ordered one of his right away. If they come up where you can personalize it, do not think Marshawn Lynch will not also be in my closet. But the interesting thing about all of this to me is I've heard actually that they're considering now wearing them for the Cowboys game too, because the old school two jerseys together would be really good. That would be really interesting. So, but there was such a huge positive push for this. And the media surrounding it, I mean, Albert Breer, Ian Rappaport, all of them were like, oh my God, these are so good. This is exactly what we've needed. You didn't get that from all the other jerseys, and you certainly didn't get that from the Titans throwback jerseys. That has just caused a backlash I don't think they thought they were going to get. And so it's been really interesting to see how much positivity around this. I'm wondering if the action greens will completely go away after next year, and then we're going to see these a little bit more.
Yeah, when I saw those Houston uniforms, I thought, what if the Oklahoma City Thunder wore uniforms for that game?
So bad.
It's not good.
So bad.
It's interesting.
And they want to wear it when they play Houston. That's what pisses me off. Yes. Yeah. They're like, they plan on wearing them for the Houston games, is what I read today. And I was like,
No, the commissioner should step in on that one. I mean,
okay. Since Dayna, though, brought up a former player with the uniforms, I want to also throw in a custom answer. I want a Chris Warren throwback jersey.
Okay.
42?
Yes.
Top of my head. I don't know.
I know it's a 40 number.
Okay, yeah. Look, it'll be a big miss if they don't offer a customizable option, and I've heard that they are going to. It's just that they're just trying to keep up with demand right now is tough. I've heard some people have been told that their ship dates are end of August for jerseys they've already bought. So I haven't pulled the trigger on one yet. Like you, Dayna. I'm the opposite of you. I have a problem. And in my head, I've already spent about $4,000, but I haven't. I'm going to take some time and let kind of supply and demand work itself out before I make a decision. I'm kind of leaning though towards one of the numbers that signifies then and now. Like when I was talking about the throwbacks on the show last week, I mentioned that for whatever reason from that era, when I think of those uniforms, John Kitna pops into my head. Well, John Kitna wore number 7. So I could kind of kill two birds with one stone there if I get a Geno Smith jersey, right? Likewise, I mentioned this recently when talking to the former wearer of number 21, that if I got a Devin Witherspoon jersey, I would also be getting a Paul Moyer jersey. So I'm kind of leaning that way, although Kenneth Walker stands out too. I just like I like the symmetry of 9 and the single digit. I'll probably just end up getting way too many. Way too many. And then you got to get the hat to go with it.
I know. And I bought the sweatshirts and all this. Oh God, they're just so good. Yeah.
Get the sleeves. Yeah.
It's funny, the power that nostalgia has. Because when we had those uniforms, I didn't think they were anything special. I mean, granted, they weren't, they were loose sleeves back then, and they weren't as tighter fitting, and the helmets weren't as cool. But I didn't think they were special until I saw them come back. So
it was a bit of a dagger, though, when JSN said that he wasn't alive when they wore those jerseys.
Yeah.
Awesome kid.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Love that they used him though, in that video was so well done. And I still go back and watch it every once in a while to see if I can find something on the wall or something around that bedroom that I didn't spot the first time. Cause that was basically my bedroom that they used for that set. And my parents' kitchen, I think, with all the dated, they just did such a great job with that. Although I wasn't sure, maybe one of you can explain this to me, or maybe it went right over my head. The significance of the band rehearsing in the garage as he walked through it.
I think it's just relating to Seattle grunge era bands.
It had to be because they weren't playing any kind of recognizable tone or any. That was one that I thought might have missed a little bit.
Well, was he going for that bass kind of intro to the Pearl Jam song that they played? Maybe
it was the kind of the initial sketch version of it. I'll have to watch it again, I guess. It's like the Zapruder film. There's a lot
Get something out of it.
Meanings and Easter eggs in there. Let's talk about some of the current players on the field. Dayna, start with you. Who are you? If you could go to practice on Wednesday, who would your eyes be on first and foremost? Who are you the most excited to see?
I mean, obviously you want to look at Witherspoon and JSN. You want to watch. I'm completely enamored with Mike Morris now for non-football reasons because he's stinking hilarious. And that whole Taylor Swift video they put out made me laugh so hard, and he sent him the video and he was singing or whatever. But so I think that's, he's going to be a new fan favorite. Nick Ballor's got some competition. Let's put it that way. But, I think that, to be honest with you, I'd be really fascinated to watch these rookies, see how quickly they learn. But I'm much more interested in watching Cross and Lucas and see how that second year jump goes. We need them to have a bigger second year jump. And I think that they're capable, and I think that they're talented, and I think that that's actually going to happen. The defense, I know we're talking about this later, and the defensive line is a huge issue, but I don't know that we're going to see any fixes of that in the preseason or practice. You're not going to get that field. So I think if I were going to practice, I definitely would want to keep my eye on those second year rookies to see, or the second year, I guess they're not rookies anymore, the second year players, to see if they start to make that jump. The other one, and I don't want to steal everybody's from you, is probably Geno. I want to see what his second year jump is going to look like too.
Sure. Yeah. It's interesting that you are always so adamant about how much you love the defense, and yet all your answers so far have been
on the
offensive side pretty much.
Well, because I don't know. It's so funny because I feel like I can look at the defense and I just kind of know what's going on with it, where the offense, I'm like, I don't know. Are you better? Are you not better? I can't. You annoy me. So
maybe
I don't know.
You can explain it to me, because the defense, the back end of the defense is really intriguing to me. How are they going to use all those pieces in the secondary? The bringing on of Love at safety. If you have him and Adams and Diggs, and then Witherspoon and Reek, and how are they going to? Is it Michael Jackson who ends up getting some of those nickel snaps? How are they going to get all of those pieces? There's a lot of starting caliber talent among that group, and there's really only 4 starting spots, 5 if you go nickel.
So what's interesting to me when we talk, because I've been thinking about that a lot too, because it's like almost too much depth, right? But think about the last time Seattle had that in defense, and it was on the line, and that was the Super Bowl years.
Right.
And that's because they did that constant rotation. And I've been waiting and waiting for Seattle to be able to do that again. It was so good for their players. Their players stayed more healthy. The line was fresh. Everyone played better because there was this constant rotation of players in and out, all able to do their job. I feel like that's maybe what we're going to see, obviously dependent on a couple of injuries. We got to see how Jamal comes out and that sort of thing, how that secondary could be. Tariq got his starter. I think Witherspoon is the one who may come in and out the first half of the season until he gets his feet a little more wet. And we'll have to see who sits there on that other side. But I do feel like we're getting to that rotational point, at least in the secondary. The line, no. But in the secondary, definitely.
I think it's a good point. It's you can never have too many of those guys. And we've spent years kind of playing catch up at both at that position and at the edge position, really outside linebacker, where we just didn't have enough, or we relied too much on one guy or two guys, and the drop off. I remember for years there, our third cornerback was essentially Nico Thorpe, and all respect to Nico, who's on the coaching staff now. Like, that was a big drop off, and now it's a good problem to have. A lot of people will say, hey, maybe we should trade from our cornerback depth to maybe add an interior defensive lineman or something else we need. No, because you never know. People forget so quickly that Richard Sherman was third on the depth chart his rookie year and only got his shot later in that season because of injuries to other players. I certainly wouldn't want to dip into that now that we've kind of stockpiled that kind of secondary talent for sure. You make a great point, Dayna, too. It struck me as you were talking about Lucas and Cross, how much I feel like they've been just taken for granted this offseason. That there's so much focus on the center position and right guard and Bradford and Haynes and that battle, and then the center battle, that like the assumption is just that, hey, we're set at tackle. But, we do need to see those guys take a step forward, especially I think, there's some improvement that can be made by Charles Cross. We need to see him get a little better, right?
Yeah, definitely. Especially at run blocking. I think that's the biggest thing that we need to see from him. I think that we saw such good things out of them. It's easy to forget them, like you said, because they were consistent. They were good. I mean, Cross would have a moment where you're like, ooh, rookie. He would just kind of pop up out of nowhere. Oh, there it is. First year player. But they were few and far between, to be quite honest with you. I also think that toward the end of the season, he was starting to wear down. I think they were all really tired. And so I think that fitness level, if you've kept it up over the offseason, that's what we kind of need to see from them. But the most important piece of this entire team, which makes me vomit to say, because you guys know I cannot hack this, is we have to keep Geno upright. We have to keep him healthy, because no offense to Drew Lock or that other guy who's Allers or something, his last name. I didn't know who that quarterback was.
Well, maybe they worked out another.
Right. With Stinnett. Yeah, with Stinnett. But so it's like, I think that is, we have to keep him there. So that line is important. Now, I know you asked if we're going to talk about our biggest area of concern. It is not the line, not the offensive line for me, but I do think that we want to see them even get better.
Let's get into that. Brandon, you first. And we've touched on some of this already because things naturally tend to come up. But the one thing that kind of makes you toss and turn at night a little bit, that you're just not sure of yet, that worries you about this roster being able to, reach their potential.
Yeah. And it's got to be the interior of the defense, right? Because it was such a problem last year that every team could just have their way running the football right up the middle, and there was no stopping it. And it was the reason why the games against the Rams were so close. And it was the reason why they lost to Tampa, and the reason why they couldn't beat the Niners. Like, every coach that could exploit it did. And even the ones that really didn't have a whole lot of talent were able to exploit it too. So and really, you talk about Draymond Jones in the offseason, that being the big acquisition. He's not a stellar run defender. I think the way that they approached the run defense by going out and getting Jones and Reed, they have a lot of TFLs or run stops, I believe. And so there was that portion of it. But in terms of their run grades, I think that they weren't graded out super high in previous years. So you hope that Jaron Reed can kind of go back to his self that we saw a few years back. Can he return to that kind of form? And can Draymond grow in that part of his game too? And can the linebackers that they, with Bobby Wagner coming back, I have little worry about him, but where's the other depth?
Yeah. Dayna?
Oh, I think that's it for everybody, right? Like, it's a glaring area of concern. The only thing I wonder about some of the, like, what was is it Hall, the new rookie?
Derek Hall, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, we could get greatly surprised by him, right? Like, there is a few little beacons, but to be honest with you, as you mentioned at the top of the show, the Seahawks don't have money to go out and get somebody. They just don't. Yeah. And so unless they were to cut a huge contract, I don't think that that's going to happen. I don't know that they have the opportunity to go get someone to help them. So in turn, they have to look at the players they have and see how they can get them to play better and be more consistent, because if you, as much as there's been crap talked about the running backs this whole entire offseason, if you can't stop the run, you're done. You're just done.
And I'll just kind of take your answers and sort of add on to it. Because that's obviously the thing that most people seem to agree would be the difference between the Seahawks record of last year and improving it, gaining ground on the 49ers and contending. It's not so much that I'm worried about the players, because they all seem to be talented football players. And in some ways we've made some upgrades. Draymond Jones is the most dynamic free agent they've ever signed. In the last 10 years anyway. I'll put it on Clint Hurt and that defensive staff. And can they put all those pieces together? Because they kind of not necessarily threw last year's, well, maybe they did throw last year's defensive line under the bus because they released them all. They moved on from all of them. But there were times where they would even openly say, hey, look, it wasn't a matter of not being good enough. It was a matter of not executing the scheme, not being in the right place at the right time. So who does that fall on, right? That's coaching staff. So you went out, you invested heavily in the defensive line in free agency and in the draft, and you're going to put a lot on those guys' shoulders. And then you bring back Bobby as a guy who has been there. He's been through the warfare and showed everybody he still had a lot in the tank last year in LA. Can you put all those pieces together and execute better on a game in, game out basis? Because there were stretches where they looked good last year, and then they would just get gouged on the explosive plays. Like just when they were starting to look better, then that Raiders game came along and we're like, what the hell is happening right now? Can they avoid those types of letdowns, be more consistent? Because I think we all agree that this offense may be loaded to the point that the defense only has to be good. They don't have to be great. We'd hope that they're on their way to being great, but they don't have to be right away.
And to the point of coaching, it wasn't just last year that the run defense was bad. Go back to 2 years ago and look at the number of tackles that Jordan Brooks and Bobby Wagner. It was a ridiculous number of tackles. I think both of them ended up in the top 5 of the entire NFL. Yeah. And if your linebackers are getting that many tackles, it's because your guys up front aren't getting any. And so it goes back a couple years.
Yeah. How about this? I did my 53-man roster prediction recently, and I was accused of it being very boring because I didn't really have any shockers. I didn't have any, and I just think that's where the state of the roster. I don't think there's a lot of glaring holes that are up for grabs anymore. But if there were, I think it's your turn, Dayna. I'll start with you. If there were one name player, well-known player, a surprising veteran that you think might be in jeopardy of not making the final 53.
I hate to be boring, but I really don't think there is. I mean,
it's a good thing, right?
I do. Okay, I'm looking over the depth chart. I mean, the obvious one is D. Eskridge. I mean, not being there, I guess you could call him a vet. He's been there a while, but I don't think that would shock anybody, especially now if JSN comes in and knocks it out. Like it's just, he hasn't shown any reason to be there.
It's tough, right? I think it speaks to.
Yeah, I can't.
I think it speaks to the quality of the roster.
Devin Bush would be, if I were to pick one to be the most likely, it would be him just because he has all the injury questions.
Yeah.
But there's not a whole lot of depth other than Vi Jones, or would they move somebody from the end spot to an interior linebacker spot?
Yeah.
I think that's really, you hit the nail on the head. There's just not enough depth to dump these people. In the places that you have depth, you don't want to dump them. Maybe wide receiver, like literally maybe wide receiver. But otherwise, there's just not enough there to say, you know what, we really don't need you, because we do. Because someone's going to get hurt by week 6. It's just the way it works.
It's an interesting preseason, or it will be an interesting preseason, because as much as Pete Carroll has built his culture based on that word, competition, outside of the center position and maybe right guard, although I think if Phil Haynes is healthy, Bradford's chances of starting week 1 are probably pretty slim. That might be the only battle that's up for grabs in camp this year. And it'll be interesting to see how Pete handles that, because he'll try to drum that up, and he'll try to make us think that it's a really competitive camp. But with preseason especially being shorter than it ever has been, and just not wanting to protect some of these guys and not play them as much, I just don't know if you're going to be able to manufacture some of those competitive battles for people for appearance's sake as you have in the past.
Yeah, even thinking about those types of battles, other than center you brought up and guard, maybe the outside linebacker spot opposite of Nwosu.
Yeah. Who's going to get the most snaps there?
Yeah.
Sure. But even then, we expect to see a rotation there. We expect to see all those guys play.
Right.
It's almost time to get going. I want to end on this. I asked you both to prepare just kind of a final statement or sort of a state of the union. Brandan, we'll start with you on just kind of where you feel like this team is right now, given the entire offseason, the landscape of what's happened around them in the division, in the conference, and what they've added and what they've lost heading into camp. Sort of what's your overriding feeling about this team?
I'm so excited about this year, and the announcement of the uniforms kind of kicked it off, but it's just the idea of this being Geno's team this offseason. He's been able to have no question about whether or not he's going to be the starter going into this year. And then adding in those other pieces, the offensive line is really exciting just because there are so many young players there. And so you hope that there's improvement. You got Kenneth Walker, who can be an extremely dynamic running back. And if you pair that then with a trio of wide receivers, now with JSN being drafted and so much excitement around him, it's hard not to be excited about the offense going into this year. And while there's questions on the defense, there's so many exciting aspects of the defense too that I'm excited about. Now, whether or not it's a team that you look at and say, hey, this is a team that's going to go deep into the playoffs, I think what we see from the team the first 5-6 games of the season is going to tell us, how much hope we might have toward the playoffs. But it's got you excited for the future. And you didn't think it was going to be a 1-year turnaround when we were at this point a year ago. And the team made the playoffs. There's expectations, at least, to get back to the playoffs. It's just, can they take that next step? And I'm excited to see that.
Dayna.
Well, I have to start this out by admitting something. So I was going back over some old podcasts that I did last year. I was looking for a couple of specific quotes and I couldn't remember which one it was in. And last year when I did a Field Gulls podcast, I had Griff Surgeon on, who people know as See Mike Spin Move. Mm-hmm. And he and I were having this conversation. And in this conversation, we were talking about Geno. And it was right after week 3 and Seattle was 1-2. And we were having this conversation about Geno, and both of us were going on and on about the rookie quarterback we were going to get next year. And we really hoped Geno just played well enough that he would get picked up by another team. And I mean, there was no question. It was all, this is how it's going to be and blah, 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 blah. And I listened back on that looking for this quote, and I absolutely cringed. I couldn't believe now what has happened that and I was not alone in this.
No, you and I talked about it.
Giving him a chance to get this job, right? He was going to have it for a year. And it wasn't until my friend Emery Hunt came on and said, Dayna, have you ever thought of maybe Geno should stay? And I was like, what? I thought it was crazy. Absolutely right.
I remember that. Yeah.
So yeah, it was very interesting. So I am now very excited for 2 reasons. One, I'm thrilled what has happened for Geno and for this team because he came in and has done so well. 2, I'm really, really glad that the Russell Wilson BS is over and we don't have to keep dealing with the, draft picks we're going to get and this, that, and the other. And we can stop talking about that, although they never will, but hopefully it'll calm down. Yeah. But I think what I'm really excited about is that this team feels young again. We're not like, and I love Al Woods. God, I hope he does good for the Jets. He was my favorite players. But we don't have the Al Woods and the Dwayne Browns and the guys in their late 30s, mid to late 30s, who we have to worry about a misstep is going to take them out, and we have no one behind them. These guys are young, they're energetic, they're spunky, and I missed that. I think I missed that more than I knew that I had. And so I'm very excited for all of that energy to come back under Bobby's leadership and to see how they can start to put that back together again. Because I think that, like I said before, Geno is also going to make a second-year jump. And we're going to see such great offense out of this team. and such great secondary play that hopefully that will make up for any defensive questions on the line or run stopping that we have. And it's just fun. There isn't a sense of dread that I had last year because we didn't know what was going to be put on the field in front of us. I feel like we know this year, and that's a lot more fun.
Yeah, good stuff, you guys. It does feel like from a year ago, just they've done a really nice job, John and Pete and the whole staff in the front office, of just minimizing questions. Like at this time a year ago, quarterback obviously was the big question, but there was questions at running back. There was major questions in the secondary. We didn't know who was going to play corner. And now we just had a discussion a few minutes ago about how we might have too much depth there. It's basically the defensive front and the run defense is the only glaring concern or question that people seem to have about this team. And yet we're talking about a roster that's ascending and that's young. I haven't seen the numbers league wide, but it has to be one of the top 5-6 youngest rosters in the league, I would think. So they might still be a year away from really becoming a legitimate contender. But I don't think any of us have to squint very hard to see the direction that this roster is going. And now that all the dust is settled after the Russell Wilson trade and we see what they've done with all those assets. So I have a hard time. Well, 2014, I guess, would be the last time that I was this excited about a training camp and a preseason to see what a roster could do, to see back then if they could continue and maybe win another Super Bowl and that kind of thing. But to see what this team's going to do and how it's all going to come together is, I can't wait. Can't wait to get started. So great to have you guys back on the show. Brandan, let people know what you're doing and about your other podcasts and what you guys have planned for this first week of camp.
Yeah, we'll be kicking things off here this week. Actually, we have one more show to finish with our Know Your Rivals series, where we go and we dump on our NFC West teams, like the 49ers are coming up. So we saved the best of the division for last, and that's pretty fun. So, but with training camp coming up this week, I'm sure we'll be doing something, and then here we go into our regular season, SeahawkersPodcast.com. If you want to check it out. Thanks for having Clinton on last week. I enjoyed that show. Of course. And just looking forward to getting going, man.
And Dayna.
Well, you can always find the Our Turf football podcast. We're on YouTube and we're on Twitter and on Facebook and live everywhere, anywhere you can. So we do that every week, but we cover all 32 teams. So I like to warn people it's not a Seahawks specific podcast. And then of course I do Real Hawk Talk with those Hawk Blogger boys, which is still real tiring some days, but their show they have planned for Thursday, it'll be worth watching, just put it that way. So it'll be good, but we're excited because, especially the Our Turf girls, we have news again and we have things that are coming through. And I think that sometimes it's not great news, like we talked about earlier, but it's fun to be back in the thick of it a little bit.
Well, thanks for giving me some content for this week. It's always easy to talk Seahawks with you guys, even if the headlines and the newsy stuff isn't as prevalent. We will catch up again soon, of course. Later this week on the show, still trying to sync up schedules with Brandan Kane of the Hawks Nest podcast. We've been going back and forth trying to get him on as well. And then Wednesday, we'll just kind of see. I was talking to Bill Alvstad today. We don't know yet for sure if the Seahawks are going to live stream any of training camp this year like they have in the past. And if they are, how usable or how valuable that's going to be. But if they are, I'll keep my eye on that, react to that, and certainly any news that happens along the way. So until then, follow me on Twitter at Seahawks Forever. Don't forget to subscribe to the page. It's the best way to support it. Until next time, forever and always, go Hawks.